Ladies and gentlemen, let's take a closer look at one of the biggest puzzles in Iraq's economy today. Oil prices are rising, revenues are flowing into the government's coffers. Yet the Iraqi dinar continues to struggle against the US dollar. How can a country earning billions from its oil exports still face a weak and unstable currency at home? On paper, Iraq's situation should look strong. Every day, millions of barrels of oil leave the country, sold in global markets at prices that guarantee hefty profits. Those sales are almost always settled in US dollars, giving Iraq a steady stream of hard currency. In fact, official reports suggest Iraq has built up tens of billions in foreign reserves. Money that, in theory, should protect the dinar and keep inflation under control. And yet, when you walk into the markets of Baghdad, Basra, or Erbil, the reality is different. The dinar is under pressure. The black market dollar rate remains higher than the official rate. Traders complain of shortages. Ordinary citizens watch food and fuel prices climb, wondering why their currency cannot hold its ground when the country is so rich in oil. The answer lies in a complex mix of structural problems. Iraq's economy is dangerously dependent on oil, with very little domestic production of consumer goods. That means nearly everything: rice, sugar, medicine, electronics, even construction materials, must be imported. And those imports must be paid for in dollars, not dinars. So even though Iraq is earning billions, the demand for dollars inside the country keeps rising. Families want dollars for savings. Traders want dollars for imports. Smugglers want dollars to move cash across borders. And all of this demand puts relentless pressure on the dinar. Another issue is trust. Iraqis have lived through decades of currency crises, sanctions, and devaluations. For many, the dollar represents stability, while the dinar represents uncertainty. So even when oil revenues climb, people still prefer to hold dollars as a safe haven. That psychology itself weakens the dinar. But there's also the role of international politics. The United States has tightened controls on how Iraq's banking system can access dollars, aiming to prevent money laundering and the flow of U.S. currency into sanctioned countries. These restrictions mean that while Iraq has dollars on paper, not all of them are easily available to traders or the public. This gap creates opportunity for the black market, and once again, it is the average Iraqi who pays the price. So here we are, oil dollars flowing in, but inflation pressures rising, the dinar struggling, and public frustration growing louder. The big question now is, can the central bank of Iraq bridge this gap? Or will the dollar continue to dominate Iraq's financial life despite the oil windfall? Ladies and gentlemen, let's go deeper into this paradox that defines Iraq's economy today. Oil prices are climbing, revenues are strong, reserves are swelling, and yet, the Iraqi dinar remains fragile. Why is this happening, and what does it mean for Iraq's future? Let's start with a simple but important question. Where does the oil money actually go? When Iraq sells oil, the payments are made in US dollars. Those dollars flow directly into the central bank's reserves or are used to cover government spending, such as salaries, contracts, and debt payments. But here's the catch. The majority of those transactions do not directly touch the lives of ordinary Iraqis. Instead, the money circulates in a closed loop between the government, large contractors, and international markets. The shopkeeper in Baghdad, the teacher in Basra, or the farmer in Mosul rarely see the benefit of those oil dollars in their daily lives. This creates a strange divide. On the one hand, Iraq looks rich on paper. On the other hand, citizens feel poor because the dinar they earn is worth less and less. It's like watching a river flow past your village without being able to drink from it. Now, let's examine the second piece of the puzzle: imports and the dollar dependency. Iraq imports nearly everything it consumes. From food to fuel, electronics to medicine, construction material to clothing, most of it comes from abroad. And every single one of those imports is paid in dollars, not dinars. This creates a one-way demand. The Iraqi economy constantly needs fresh dollars to pay for foreign goods. So even if oil revenues bring in billions of dollars, the demand inside Iraq is so high that it creates a permanent imbalance. People want dollars to buy goods, traders need dollars to import, and smugglers seek dollars to move across borders. This demand outpaces supply, and that's when the parallel or black market rate begins to diverge from the official rate. And here is where psychology and trust play a critical role. Iraqis have lived through decades of wars, sanctions, hyperinflation, and sudden currency devaluations. These experiences have left a scar. People simply do not trust the dinar the way they trust the dollar. Even when the dinar is stable, families save in dollars. Parents give dollars to their children for security. Businesses settle contracts in dollars to avoid surprises. This cultural preference for the dollar becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more people seek dollars, the weaker the dinar appears. But the story doesn't stop there. We also have to consider international restrictions. The U.S., which has a heavy influence over Iraq's financial system, has imposed tighter monitoring of dollar flows to prevent money laundering and the funding of sanctioned countries. In practice, this means Iraqi banks cannot freely access all the dollars they technically have. This bottleneck creates shortages inside the country. So while Iraq's reserves may look huge on paper, more than $100 billion, the actual dollars circulating in the local market are fewer. And fewer dollars mean higher demand, higher black market prices, and more pressure on the dinar. Now, let's talk about the black market itself, because it is central to this crisis. Officially, the government sets an exchange rate, say 1,320 dinars per dollar. But on the streets of Baghdad or Erbil, the rate can be much higher, sometimes reaching 1,450 or even 1,500 dinars per dollar. For a business importing rice, sugar, or medicine, that difference is huge. It eats into profits, raises costs, and ultimately forces prices higher for the consumer. And so inflation begins to creep into daily life. Bread becomes more expensive. Cooking oil rises. Meat, fruit, and vegetables all cost more. For families already living paycheck to paycheck, these changes are devastating. And here lies the core tragedy. Iraq is earning more from oil than ever before, yet its people are struggling with rising prices. The government and the central bank of Iraq face a dilemma. Should they release more dollars into the market to bring down the black market rate? That could calm inflation in the short term, but it also risks draining reserves too quickly. Or should they tighten restrictions to prevent smuggling and corruption? That might protect reserves but also creates shortages that fuel the black market. It is a delicate balancing act, and so far, neither approach has fully solved the problem. Some argue that the solution is to strengthen the dinar through revaluation. Imagine if tomorrow the government announced that $1 equals 1,000 dinars instead of 1,320. That would instantly boost the psychological strength of the currency. But without structural reforms, such a move could backfire, leading to a surge in demand for dollars and a drain on reserves. Others suggest that Iraq must focus on economic diversification. By producing more of its own food, fuel, and goods, the country could reduce its dependence on imports, thereby reducing its dependence on dollars. But diversification takes time, planning, and political stability, three things Iraq has struggled to achieve. Meanwhile, the people continue to wait. A teacher in Basra wonders why her salary buys less every month. A young entrepreneur in Baghdad struggles to price goods when the dollar rate changes daily. A family in Mosul worries about paying more for rice and sugar, even though they hear on the news that Iraq's oil revenues are at record highs. This disconnect between wealth at the top and struggle at the bottom is what fuels frustration, protests, and discontent. And let's not forget, currency weakness is not just about economics. It is about politics. When people lose confidence in their currency, they lose confidence in their government. They begin to suspect corruption, mismanagement, or worse. And in a country as fragile as Iraq, public anger over the economy can quickly turn into political instability. So, where does Iraq go from here? One path is reform. Crack down on smuggling. Increase transparency in banking. Invest in agriculture and industry. Encourage digital payments in dinars rather than cash in dollars. Use oil wealth not just to build reserves, but to build a more resilient domestic economy. The other path is stagnation. Keep pumping oil, keep building reserves, but allow the dollar to dominate daily life. leaving the dinar weak and the people frustrated. This path leads to a cycle of crises, where every dollar surge sparks panic, inflation, and distrust. Ladies and gentlemen, the paradox of Iraq's economy is clear. Oil money fills the treasury, but the dinar in your pocket struggles to buy bread. The country is rich, yet the people feel poor. Until this gap is closed, until the wealth of oil translates into the strength of the dinar, Iraq will remain trapped in this cycle of abundance and scarcity. The question now is, will Iraq's leaders act boldly to transform oil revenues into real currency stability, or will the dinar remain hostage to the dollar despite all the wealth flowing in? For now, the answer is uncertain. But one thing is clear, the dinar's struggle is not just an economic story. It is the story of Iraq itself. Rich in resources, rich in potential, but still searching for stability, trust, and a future where its people truly feel the benefits of its wealth.